Hey guys, it's Belmont. So this is my reaction series to Junji Ito's work. Uh, it's a horror manga apparently. They just kind of do the scenes. It's been translated and voice acted into English. A good friend of mine sent it to me, asked me to react to it. If you saw the first one, it was just kind of weird. The horror aspect of it was lost on me, I think, because I don't know, just the window growing out really didn't do anything. The artwork was great, the story was okay, but at the end was whatever. So this is the second one called The Licking Woman. Let's give it a shot, see what it's about.
My friends, have I got me a story for you? Quite the intimate story. Something that may violate your sense of comfort. Who knows? Maybe give you that tingling sensation. Today, my friends, I get to spoil you with the story of a stalking monstrosity who has a thing for spreading a little happiness when the sun goes down. You see, when this unnamed city finds itself stepping into the slumbering night where its people are relaxing within the walls of their peaceful homes, those who find themselves wandering the darkened streets, ignorant towards the evil that is lurking within the shadows, it's now a moment where our monster within today's story would take a fancy with a poor soul who's on his way to visit his soon-to-be wife. A strange woman sharing a bit of affection towards this unsuspected traveler, horror show style. My friends, today's story is not only a disturbing yarn that will haunt you in the most unique way, but will definitely give you that sensation of discomfort. The kind of kiss that desecrates intimacy, violates your individual security, and can give you an experience that is both traumatic and deadly.
Well, that's not a good thing to have happen.
When Tsuyoshi greeted Miku from his isn't worth getting the police involved, even Miku's pet dog would give Tsuyoshi that unpleasant experience when the dog's curiosity would have it tasting the sticky substance that had covered Tsuyoshi's skin. Basically, Tsuyoshi was disgusted, disturbed, and in dire need of taking a relaxing bath. Hopefully cleanse the revolting Now with the city being haunted by a monstrosity, forcing authorities on constant patrol, and having groups of frightened citizens marching through the darkened streets, desperately looking for a woman who would spend her murky nights preying upon any poor soul who would cross her path. But for one troubled citizen who walked among the crowd, wasn't overwhelmed with a dwelling fear, but was driven by a desire for vengeance. A woman whose future was taken away by a murderer, and who would devote her continuous nights on seeing this woman face justice for her disgusting crimes, lading her son with a disgusting act. And as the crowd began their pursuit against the laughing woman after she was interrupted from her ritual and dousing the poor child with water, it was within seconds before the furious crowd had lost the woman through the back alleyways of the city. But for Miku, who was determined to bring an end to this horrible madness, her desperate efforts had put her a couple steps ahead of the chase, coming across the fleeing woman just a few streets away from the crowd, and with Miku only a few feet away from grabbing this woman. That was when she stopped, twirled around to face her pursuer. The woman greeted Miku with a disgusting grin, before the monstrosity would force its way out of her mouth, like a foreign creature. The tongue had looked abnormally swollen, throbbing with warts and riddled with bluish veins, covered with a thickened layer of saliva that would drip from the edge of her bulging tongue, sticking her tongue out like it was giving Miku a personal show. Miku's hatred, her intense need for justice, was now overwhelmed by a paralyzing fear. like her mind had somehow frozen itself by the unexpected situation. Even as the woman stepped closer to the petrified Miku, having the poor girl cringe at the sight of her dreadful tongue, it was when Miku had felt the long, slimy tongue rubbing itself across the side of her face. The experience had not only made every muscle within Miku's body clench tightly, but had finally given her the ability to scream in utter terror as the woman continued licking her helpless prey. When the crowd had ended the woman's licking torment when investigating the screaming, they were about to find themselves pursuing another hopeless effort of capturing this woman, if it wasn't for Miku tackling her, finally putting an end to this murderous campaign. The Licking Woman was a mystery that had shocked all of Japan in more ways than one. Till this day, nobody knew who she was or anything about her. It was like she had just appeared out of nowhere. But the one thing about this case that had shocked Miku was how there was no toxins nor abnormalities found with her tongue. That there was nothing about this woman that had identified her as something more than just a normal human being, which could not have been true. That even though Miku immediately washed out the poisonous saliva from her body after the Licking Woman was captured, it must have been days where Miku's skin had found itself experiencing that burning discomfort, itchiness, and a strange feeling that had given her those sleepless nights. Of course, due to the bizarre nature of the crime and the lack of evidence, meaning that there was no identifiable toxins that could link the woman with the murders, justice had found itself taking pity upon the Licking Woman by sending her to a mental institution for rehabilitation. It must have been years later, a time when the city had roughly moved on from the Licking Woman incident. Well, all besides one, of course. Since then, Miko had normally wasted her dreary nights at the local bar, trying to find an alternative method of relieving herself from both the trauma of being licked and the loss of her beloved fiancé, but most of all, the fact that there was no justice for what was done. But when Nagaoka would mention the shocking news, how the Licking Woman had recently went through a full recovery and was released back into the public again, before mysteriously disappearing, that was when Miku knew. Somehow, the Licking Woman had fooled the doctors, fooled everybody because of how they were dealing with something that they did not understand, finding a way to kill this woman without the risk of going to jail. That was when Nagaoka had proposed an outrageous idea that just might work. Potassium cyanide. If it were to be digested, the chemical would mix itself with the stomach acids and release a cyanide gas that will automatically kill. But if you rub it on your skin, well, even though potassium cyanide is lethal, you should be fine, especially if it's being licked off by someone else. You know, I wonder if it's justice that is driving Miku into wandering the streets at night. A selfless act of nobility of sparing the people from enduring another traumatic torment. But seeing her clutching that small bottle of potassium cyanide, is it vengeance that compels her into wandering these streets?
Clearly it's vengeance.
An eye for an eye, right? If Miku had only favored a bit of wisdom, that sometimes, most times, an eye for an eye just only makes you more blind. It must have been for several days where Miku had wandered the darkened streets in search of a monstrosity that had escaped the right hand of justice. Following the day after the woman's release and disappearance, 5 people had already been reported of being attacked by the Licking Woman. Since then, the number of victims had increased, and now finding herself wandering the familiar alleys, the Licking Woman's former hunting ground where she was caught by Miku, hoping that this night of playing the role of willing prey would be the night where she would achieve vengeance against this woman who...
So I'm just going to make a prediction that they catch her with potassium cyanide, they attribute that to what's killing everybody, and the innocent person gets locked up.
isn't even human. It was when Mikyu had walked by a narrow alley where she would come upon a familiar sight. There she was, in the flesh, the woman who had killed Mikyu's fiancé, and as the licking woman shared a sinister expression of glee towards a reunion with an old friend, also giving Mikyu a warm welcoming with a slimy tongue that forced its way out of her mouth, just anticipating to rub itself all over the soft flesh of its courageous victim. But before the licking woman would perform her disgusting ritual, there was something about Mikyu that she found to be special, which is why the woman would give Mikyu an unexpected kiss, a little tongue that had made her flinch from the rancid taste, distracting the disgusting woman as she would coat her arm with a layer of potassium cyanide. And as the woman began sliding her tongue from Mikyu's neck and slowly working her way down to the arm, giving Mikyu that horrendous, slimy experience, a familiar tickling sensation that had traumatized the city from a life of everyday normality. It was a tingling horror that had come to a sudden stop, an indicator that the potassium cyanide had begun introducing itself to the woman's digestive system and began its vile work of granting this monster a violent death. It was that seconds before the woman had succumbed to the poison, she would desperately rip out her tongue, like it was an oversized parasite that had been pulled from her foamy mouth. It was a gruesome scene that our brave executioner, slowly realizing that she had just committed murder, trying to shake off the horrible feeling that she had just killed this woman, focusing on the reality of her situation, that this was not a woman, but a monster. Even with the woman being lifeless, the tongue had still twitched and moved. And as Mikyu's reluctant curiosity had her taking a closer look upon this morbid discovery, that was when she would be greeted by another slimy kiss, as the tongue threw itself in the ground and tried forcing its way into her mouth. Spitting out the disgusting thing, Mikyu was both overwhelmed by the possibility of digesting potassium cyanide and the rancid taste that had forced her into a regurgitating panic, desperately trying to cleanse her mouth with a bottle of water as Mikyu continued her involuntary reaction from the slimy kiss. After regaining her composure, the last thing Mikyu remembered that night was how the tongue maintained its bizarre movement of bouncing around like a fish out of water, slowly trying to make its way towards Mikyu for another kiss. Now, you would have thought that Japan being free from a disgusting monster would have eased Mikyu's dwelling trauma, have her begin the journey towards a full recovery. But it didn't. In fact, the incident had given Mikyu an experience that was far worse than the fear of the streets being haunted by a licking woman, far more uncomfortable than the burning, tingling sensation that had riddled her body. When the police had found the woman's dead body, that was all they found, was just a body and no tongue. That tongue was not normal. There was something about that tongue that had made this story far more interesting. But here was what had given Mikyu those sleepless nights. On that night, when she was looking over the licking woman's dead body, it was the spilled contents from her handbag, lipstick, and a familiar pair of spectacles. After the incident, Mikyu had tried calling Nagaoka several times, but her number was in no longer use. Mikyu had even tried searching the university that Nagaoka worked at, but had found out that there was no woman named Nagaoka who had ever worked there. Of course, there was an incident of someone stealing a bottle of potassium cyanide. It was like she had never existed, which begs the haunting questions. Who was she? Why would this Nagaoka help Mikyu on killing the licking woman? Could Nagaoka have been the licking woman this entire time? It doesn't make sense. Given Mikyu potassium cyanide, that would be suicide. Then again, could there be more to this reign of terror than what Mikyu already knows? As time passed, and the terror of the licking woman had become nothing more but a horror story that would slowly fade away from the public eye, Miku had roughly moved on from her dwelling fears and found herself re-experiencing a familiar happiness. His name was Yuki, handsome, kind, a dog lover, someone who was very much like Tsuyoshi. And as Miku would spend her following days with Yuki, it was a growing romance that had Miku forgetting the horrible nightmare of the licking woman and easily move on with her life. Once again, Miku was happy, truly happy. Except, as I said before, sometimes vengeance can make us blind, especially towards an evil that we do not understand. As Miku had given Yuki a kiss, her tongue had instantly grown into an immense monstrosity, an evil that had wanted to give Miku's handsome boyfriend a little tongue before it was spit out onto the ground. A disgusting, oversized horror that had flopped and bounced around on the floor, an evil that knew how to play the vengeance game as our loving couple would succumb to the convulsions of potassium cyanide. Before the bodies of Miku and Yuki were found, there was a claim that someone had seen a giant tongue bouncing around on the scene. To this day, authorities had ignored it, saw it as nothing more but an outrageous claim. What's a twisted love story without a kiss? Well, my friends, I know that I may have spoiled a few lunches with my last revolting story, but...
So, I was clearly wrong about my prediction. I'm no Nostradamus, that's for sure. I don't know. It felt more like a... your viewers, do you know what chick tracts are? The little rectangular religious pamphlets that they pass out. It's basically nothing more than propaganda. It is propaganda. It was the original creator was what he did for the military. It felt like a chick tract. It felt like a warning story about the kissing and STDs, perhaps herpes. Kind of hidden inside of this. I could be way off base. Obviously, the narrator, I didn't do any research. I just got sent this, so maybe the narrator. This might be on someone else's YouTube, is what I'm trying to get at. The narrator might be a YouTuber. I don't know. Because obviously, this artwork is vastly different than like what we're looking at on the screen. The actual artist, Junji Ito. I don't know why, it just... This stuff isn't scary to me. This seems... It's weird, and it's interesting. I mean, it's original, that's for sure. A giant sentient tongue that kills people. Survives the poison attack, but manages to use it to kill others. I don't know. I don't know what to say about it. This is just, it's... well done, well drawn. But this time very well narrated. I don't know. I don't know. Hit like, subscribe, hit the bell button, comment below. If you're familiar with this manga or this artist, and I'm way off base on my interpretations, because I feel like I am. I feel like I'm missing a piece that I'm just not catching. I felt that way in both of them. Like the translation over to English lost something. Uh, it might be a cultural thing that I'm not catching. So if you know, enlighten me, please. Anyway, this is Belmont. Thank you for watching.